Hello everyone and welcome to this Nintendo Life episode 116, or should I say this Sony Life perhaps?
What?
I don't know, there's been some weird shifts going on in the fabric of this show. I'm NBZ, I am your host as per the usual. I'm also joined by Bally, who has come over to the dark side. Bally, how are you doing?
I'm very good, NBZ. Has everyone stopped talking about weed yet?
What I think that time is over. Like, it's this very fixed period of time where the whole world goes crazy about it, but then they move on. But then it's just the weed people who talk about weed every day at 20 past 4 every day. That's what they do.
Okay, got it.
But yeah, the public consensus on it has fallen off. Also, like, you know, there was too much else going on 420 this year that I don't think anyone else was really doing that, honestly. There's just whether you were building cardboard or becoming a Viking murderer, there's a lot of things that you could have been doing
Exactly.
on that day. So,
guess which one I picked?
well, yeah, funnily enough, you wouldn't have thought it, would you?
You wouldn't have put your money on the one I picked.
No, you wouldn't have done. But anyway, welcome to the show. This is a video game show, mostly about Nintendo, but hey, we'll talk about some other stuff sometimes, and probably this episode is the best representative of that. But Bally, what are we talking about today on this show?
To start off, we're going to be talking about what we have been playing. We have a couple of your listener emails, and for the third segment, it's back. It's the jukebox. It's coming back for, I think it's seventh outing, and NBZ, you are going to test me again. Yeah,
so basically Jukebox, if you haven't heard it before, is us testing each other on video game music to try and guess which is correct. So it's a fun time. You can play along at home, all that good stuff. And also you should want to stick around at the end because we're going to be announcing some Backlog Club stuff, some poll that you can get involved with, and some voting. So yeah, we're going to have some choices, so stay tuned to the end for that. Otherwise though, Ballet, as we have not so subtly mentioned, you got into the market of a different video game console. The first non-Nintendo console you have ever owned in your life.
In 2018.
Yeah, in 2018. How's that going for you? How's this PS4 you've bought?
It's great so far. I just felt like the time was right where... We're well into the PS4 life cycle. When did it come out? Like
2013, because the Wii U was 2012, right? And it was a year after that.
Right. So there's already a great library out for the system, and that combined with these God of War reviews was really pushing me. And then Caroline, having just beaten Breath of the Wild, was just like, I need more open world games. And I was like, well, we can definitely pick up Skyrim on Switch, but after that
it kind of runs dry, doesn't it? Like, there's not that many of those on the platform yet.
So if you want some open world experiences, and I was telling her about games like Assassin's Creed and Horizon, which I think we intend to pick both up on, and obviously Red Dead 2 later this year, we would like, right, let's do PS4. And then Caroline was like, I am more than happy to split the cost with you on this PS4. So it's a jointly owned PS4. It's not my PS4, which is good and makes it a lot cheaper. So we picked up God of War, we picked up Skyrim for Switch, and picked up Uncharted Trilogy, and of course the PS4. And I think it's a Slim. I don't think you can buy the fat anymore.
No, they got rid of the original. They basically transitioned it to where any new PS4 that you buy now is either a Pro or a Slim. And they don't call it the Slim. Even when I bought mine at launch, it didn't have any Slim verbiage on it. The only reason people call it that is because in the PS3 era, they did call it the PS3 Slim. Okay. Even though the PS3 Slim, which I own, is incredibly fucking large still. Like, it's huge. It's so crazy.
I mean, the PS4 Slim is pretty big too. Like, it's like a huge
comparably
plate.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely, like, if you look at the Wii U, which is the last, like, big home console that you've owned, it's starkly larger than that.
Yeah, exactly. I was very worried on Amazon when you're buying something on Amazon, you want to get the name just right. And I was like, it's not a Slim. And then I saw the pictures, like, they can't give me this picture and then it'll be the fat.
And clearly you didn't want to ask me because you wanted to surprise the fact that you'd bought it. So.
Yeah, had to keep it secret from NBZ. That was part of the process. So.
And then you messed that up as well.
Yeah, I messed that up. So I got it on a Thursday. I was at home for lunch setting it up. It came separately to Uncharted, and that was the day before God of War came out. So we're gonna buy God of War from just a high street here in Brussels. So
Yeah.
I had the PS4 with no games, and I set it up, and the setup's okay. I already had an account. My old
Right,
house,
because you'd previously had one,
Exactly.
your
my
last
old
place,
flat had a PS4 that I made an account on when you visited me in Brussels, and we picked up Brothers. So I logged into that, downloaded Brothers, and then I was like looking around the features, like had my friend list. You're the only friend, so I kind of clicked on you, and then it started a conversation, and I thought I better not write anything because then MBZ will know that I've got one. So I
can't
wanted
give
to
up the
wait.
game by doing that. Yeah.
Exactly, but it turns out that I was going to do a big tweet on Friday when I made sure I had God of War, because I didn't want MBZ to know I had one, and then there'd be some issue with picking up God of War and it not coming or something. So I was like waiting to do a picture on Twitter that showcased everything I'd bought. Anyway, you had found out because, in fact, I created a chat room to talk on PS4 without realizing.
Yeah, it's like Ballyman has created a conversation, and so I sent him a message being like, "You sly motherfucker," like trying to hide the fact that he'd bought this thing. So that was fun. But
and I've picked up already Inside because it was on sale, and you were making the point, MBZ, like normally I would happily pay the premium of buying indie games on Switch just because the handheld aspect is so much better. But with a game that's as short as Inside, as you were saying, it's maybe more sensible to get it on PS4.
Yeah, it'll look better, it'll run better. It's just definitely the best plan.
Is there a release date for Inside on Switch?
No, they still don't have a release date for it. It'll be a while, I think.
I think the whole interface of the whole thing takes a lot of getting used to. It feels
very foreign
different
to you.
Yeah, it feels very, very different. But
I think we've talked about this before, but like when it comes to interfaces on systems, you know what you know, and anything else is bad to you, right? And I think like that was talked about a lot when people were just denigrating the Wii U. Like Greg Miller constantly was like, I fucking hate the interface on the Wii U. It doesn't make any sense. But like you going to PS4, you're going to have the exact same issue because you just aren't used to it. Like it's not that it's inherently bad. It's that if you don't have the experience or kind of time to sit down with it and work your head around it, then you're going to feel like it sucks. And I personally, having spent time with like that platform as well as, you know, other systems, I think the PS4 interface is not very good, and trying to find what you want to find is usually pretty difficult.
Yeah, and like other friends of mine were like contacting me because I told them I had a PS4 and they're big PS4 fans, and they were like, "Oh, you need to download Fortnite." And so I'm like, "Right, I'm going to go to the PS Store, type in Fortnite, and look for the free downloadable version of Fortnite." It's like, I cannot find this for the life of me. What is going on? Like,
because it's like drowning in DLC costume packs and all this other
that
bollocks.
Shop is awful. Like, it's just it's really weird. And I had a massive issues downloading Inside because I had my previous card that's now expired registered. I was texting you about this, MBZ, and like, you can't actually change the card from within the shop. I've
had to deal with this as well. It's an awful pain in the ass.
But there is an option to change it within the shop, and you click it, and then it just gives you the details of your old card. And it's like, no, I clearly clicked a button that said I want to change card, so why are you giving me the details which I can't edit of my old card? And I had to look it up online. You have to go outside the shop into the PS4 settings and then go back in. So that was a massive pain, but honestly, it altogether, it does feel good, and it just takes getting used to. I'm trying to just avoid the whole wormhole of achievements, and I'm not really reading into
trophies on PlayStation Valley. Trophies.
Sorry, gotta get the lingo right.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm avoiding trophies, and just I don't really want to get into that whole thing, and I'm not.
You shouldn't. It's bad.
Unless there's a really, really clear reason I need to get PS Plus, I'm also going to hold off on that, because basically I'm here getting a PS4 because I want the single player PS4 exclusives. We want the open world games, like I'd mentioned before, that Caroline was keen to dive into, and I was
like the third party stuff, as you said, like Red Dead and Assassins and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, Red Dead and Assassins for sure. That just won't come to Switch, or will come to Switch in 5 years, and it's just nice to be able to have access to those games, and especially now when there's so much God of War hype, it's so great playing that game. And likewise, I'm so hyped about Spider-Man coming out later this year, and I just couldn't couldn't sit back and watch it pass me by. So yeah, I'm looking forward to Uncharted Collection and that style of game, and interactive entertainment, as Sony like to call it.
It's funny because you mentioned that to me, and I'm like, did they talk about that? And then I booted up my PS4, and literally like the first thing it says, I booted up God of War, and the first thing it says is Sony Interactive Entertainment. I was like, all right, okay, that's where you're getting that.
I was going to talk about this. Shall we start talking about God of War then?
Sure, let's move on to talking about God of War.
So the biggest reason I picked up a PS4 was for what Sony would call interactive entertainment, and I would broadly define that, although it's a very bad comparison, as mainly third-person story-driven games.
Like behind the back, yeah.
Exactly. And listening to Giant Bomb interview Cory Barlog, who's like the lead director on God of War.
Creative director, I think.
You really get a sense that this idea of games is so much closer to films than ultimately something like Nintendo talking about Japanese games. Like it feels completely, and like a lot of these studios are based in and around filmmaking areas, like in California and like LA and stuff, and Santa Monica and etc. So you really get a sense, and he's ex like LucasArts and
right. He had a history of working with Lucas, and you should go listen to that interview because it's like very interesting.
It's
like,
really good, and Brad asked some really important questions, and I sat back and I thought, this guy really sounds like a cinematic director in the way that he talks about his team and how they come up with storylines and things like
the whole idea of the no-cut camera is a very cinematic idea in of itself. So,
and I really appreciate that, and that's I just wanted to make the point that that's a large part of why I bought a PS4. Like, of course, Breath of the Wild was my favorite game of last year, but like if you try and defend, there's no story to defend. There's cinematic moments, arguably, fine, but there's not that underlying story. And the nearest Nintendo comparison I was saying to you on Twitter is something like Metroid Prime, which is one of the most Western games Nintendo have ever done. And
right, exactly.
That balance of story, action, and environmental puzzle solving that a lot of these games have it feels very much like Metroid Prime 3. And I'm only a few hours into that game, so I don't want to talk about that, but it felt a lot like that going into God of War.
Right, and just generally the philosophy for these games is the polar opposite of what Nintendo does. Like we've talked in the past about how Splatoon started life as like tofu blocks shooting ink or whatever, right? Because for Nintendo, the most important thing is the gameplay design and the gameplay concept. Then they build a world around it, then they put a character on it. That's why things like Mario Galaxy exist, is because sure, that could have been a new IP, its own thing, but they come up with these gameplay ideas and then they strap a well-known IP to it, and they're getting better about moving forward and doing new things, like with ARMS and obviously Splatoon, but their philosophy is very much rooted in game first, whereas when it comes to these Western studios, they have a story pitch. Like Horizon started with this pitch of this, apocalyptic robot dinosaur world. It wasn't anything to do with the bow systems or how you take down these big monsters. It was, here is the world and the story and the history. And absolutely, that's the complete opposite, because that's just, story is what they build their game on, and then they do everything around that. So it's a totally different experience, and something that you've not, like the one big Western game you've played that comes to mind for me is Assassin's Creed 4, and I can't think of any other.
Yeah, Assassin's Creed 4, and then literally after that is probably something like Metroid Prime. Like there's not really anything else.
Right, which is not really
which is not the
Western.
same.
Yeah, so.
And I really enjoyed Assassin's Creed 4 actually, and I've talked about that a lot on the show before. But yeah, God of War just out the gate really blew me over, like the way that it looks and the way that it tells that story. And
well, it's the first time you're kind of getting this full-fledged next generation
very
visual fidelity, isn't it?
It's really cool, and Cory actually talks about it a lot in his interviews, like the debates they had about the pacing at the start, and people were like, you need to go 45 minutes straight into the game, and he was determined that it was going to be sort of a 4 to 5 hour start,
right.
And
a slow roll. And
for someone like me who's just come into this whole new type of games and bought a PS4 for this game, I was very appreciative of that idea, because I think really
you like a slow roll anyway. You like getting some tutorials and learning shit, and
a hand-holdy tutorial, a slow learning curve. The game doesn't start till you're 5 hours in. It suits me to a T, because I like to really know and feel the game before I get onto something tougher. And this game is like doing that. I'm about 12 to 13 hours in. You think I'm about a third of the way in approximately.
Yeah, so I should mention, I picked up God of War and I finished it. The luxuries of not having a job at the moment is the fact that you can just go through. That'll be changing soon, but yeah. So yeah, I've gone through it. It took me probably 30 hours because they don't do the Nintendo thing of letting you know how many hours. As bad as it is on Switch, at least you fucking know how much you've played of the game.
Yeah.
I really couldn't tell you how much I've played. But yeah, it's a long game. It's much longer than I expected. I think that's one of my maybe criticisms of it, is for a game like this, and this style of kind of action behind the camera, very story focused. The thing that I really love about the Uncharted series is that they are perfectly paced. They are 10 hours in and out. You get a full story. You go to different places. You see a bunch of different shit, variety in gameplay, and then you're done. And it felt like this game was dragging out its conclusion a little too much. There's one too many doodads to go and find, and then one too many forks in the road to where you finally ultimately end up. And I appreciated what they wanted to do to make a grand, epic, long game. But there were sections later where I was like, this is dragging a bit too much. And that's not to say it's bad, because I really loved my time. I think God of War is a fantastic game, but I think the whole it's the thing that went around with Breath of the Wild last year, and maybe with Mario to some extent, but I find myself a little bit on the other side this time, is that this game is excellent. It's really damn good. I wouldn't call it a generation-defining masterpiece, because it does have pacing issues later on. It does drag somewhat. But yeah, I thoroughly loved it, and I know you've had a great time so far.
Yeah. What do you think of the control design? Because it does feel very weird at first. You've got your projectile with one shoulder, and your close combat with another shoulder, and then another combat with the other shoulder, and if you're not really using the face buttons essentially for what's arguably an action fighting game in many aspects, and that does feel weird.
I understood it when I was thinking about it, because the focus here on the camera and not being able to see a lot of enemies, because a lot of times you will get kind of drowned by enemies. There'll be a lot of people behind you that you can't see, and so you have to roll out the way or use a quick turn, which I haven't been using at all, to turn around and to parry or block or whatever. And so because of that, you want to be having good control over the camera at all times. And if you need control over the camera, you can't be doing all of your kind of core combo moves on the face buttons, because that one thumb has to stay in that same place. And so obviously the face buttons are used for avoiding and using Atreus to ping people. But using the shoulder buttons to hit things and X to dodge was just super weird out the gate. And it took a lot of getting used to, but I think in the end I came round on it, and I was like, okay, this is strange, but once you learn it and once you get into it, it's fine, it works, and it's kind of what the game is built around.
It works really well, and I'm getting better and better at the combat as Kratos is getting more and more powerful. That's a very satisfying curve that I'm finding. I'm not dying unnecessarily too often. It's normally just because I've made a mistake and I've deserved it. Essentially, it's not. And I'm playing on the second easiest difficulty, which is called.
It's just normal.
It's just
basically
normal. Yeah, because they've got insane hard mode, normal, and then
I've noticed that recently is that developers tend to not call their difficulties easy, normal, hard. They're usually going hey, this is the story difficulty, which is if you don't want to worry about dying or anything and just seeing the environment and all the stuff, just choose that one. And that's a great way of positioning it, because there are players who will want to explore the world and see the fantastical things, because there's a lot of that stuff in this game, but it can be challenging in an action game like this. So positioning it where it's okay, give me a balanced experience, or give me a challenge. I think that's a good way of making people not feel bad for choosing the lowest difficulty,
What do you think about Atreus, both from a story perspective and maybe more importantly a combat perspective?
Yeah, he is, and I think this game does a very good job of creating story moments out of cutscenes, just banter between characters, conversations that happen, and they do the same thing that Uncharted 4 did, which is a very clever technique that I think more story-based games should adopt, which is on the boat often they'll be talking and Kratos will start telling a story to his son. And if you dock before the story is over, he'll be like, okay, boat is for stories, boy. We're just going to keep going and we'll come back to that later. And then very naturally later on, when you get back in the boat, they'll pick up the story again, like right where they left off, and maybe give you a bit of a back kind of fill in to make sure you remember where they were.
And I feel like you can really focus on the stories while you're on the boat because, and maybe this changes later in the game, I don't want you to spoil one way or the other, but when you're on the boat, there's never any combat, you're never in any danger. No. You're just looking for, and it's genuine exploration with literally zero combat, and that feels very relaxing, where your mind is in a really good place to just listen to what their dialogue is.
Exactly, to absorb it all. And honestly, like, that's probably the most fascinating thing about this game for me overall, is the Norse mythology stuff. Yeah. Because I wasn't like super well, not very knowledgeable about Norse myths or what it entailed or anything to do with that. And so
I've seen Marvel's Thor. That taught me.
Yeah, I don't think so. So like the context for like, hey, Thor and Loki and like Odin and like people like that, I've heard these names, but I don't really know who they are or like what their history is in Norse mythology and like what their kind of significance is. And so learning more about that and being encouraged to like go out of my way to look this stuff up has really been a thing that I didn't expect coming into this game, because the way they set it up is like, okay, the Norse kind of world is like, there's this Midgard, which is where all the men live, but then all the gods live in all these different realms that are like located, and they all like exist on top of one another in this space. And that kind of idea of extra dimensional stuff, and there's stuff to do with time that they maybe touch on that I really enjoy. It really is my kind of storytelling and mythology and lore, and the one thing I will say is maybe don't like read too much about Norse mythology while you're playing the game, because there's definitely stuff in there which can spoil the game to some degree if you're smart and you kind of figure something out. There's one character in particular that I didn't look up, and I looked up afterwards, and I'm like, oh, if I had read this before, I maybe would have figured out a reveal that happens later, and that would have, like, it would have been cool for me to be like, oh shit, I realized that. But it's probably better that the game does it for you. It's interesting though, because like the whole idea of Norse mythology is everything is predestined. Like Ragnarok will happen, the world will end, all this shit will happen. Right. And so like it's this idea of everyone knowing their destiny almost.
It was interesting because Corey in that interview mentions that they were tempted to go down the Egyptian mythology route, and it's because
there are like quite a few different mythologies that they had the choice of doing. Right, they could have done Hindu, they could have done like all these different gods, like and. Norse was one that I look at it now and I'm like, well, they made a really good choice, and especially I think because of the axe, like the axe and the idea of it being like Thor's hammer, that it returns to you, that feeling when it comes back is fucking fantastic.
Oh, the sound design on that one part is incredible.
It's a combination though of like the rumble in the controller and the sound design together, and playing with headphones super works.
The PS4 controller's got a real engine in that rumble, like it's got a real like
it's not HD rumble, but it is
it's not HD. That's true.
It's very heavy, very bassy, I guess, but like getting back, because you were talking about Atreus a bit, and I think Atreus is really interesting from a story perspective as well, because he's like reflecting back at Kratos, like what kind of a person he is and how he's to deal with this son, and like you watched a video of like previous stuff, but Kratos has not had a great history when it comes to family, so it's interesting like seeing that dynamic play out and how it grows over the course of the game. And I think it's just very well done generally. But in combat, holy shit, Atreus is great. I lean on him a lot. I used him all the goddamn time, upgraded his skill tree as soon as I possibly could, to like get the high damage. Because what I was mainly doing is like there are a lot of enemies which throw projectiles at you, and they'll sometimes stand up on areas that you can't get to. So the only way to kill them is to like throw your axe at them. But if you have Atreus, you just turn the camera towards them and just like ping, 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 and they die pretty quickly because they're usually quite low level. And so that has been great. Like I really think the systems work well here in terms of if you're pointed at an enemy, generally Atreus will shoot that exact enemy. And there is a lock-on system, which I don't think is particularly great, and I didn't really use it.
Yeah, I didn't. I haven't.
But yeah, stuff's been good.
I think that my favorite thing that Atreus will do when you just upgrade him a little bit is he will just pin down some enemies and for you to just attack them with your axe. And I was just saying off mic before, but my favorite move so far, at least, is you just hold R2 and Kratos just will do a two-handed slow vertical chop down on the enemy. And it's quite hard to line up normally, but then the second Atreus is like pinning down an enemy with his like bow holding their neck or something, and you just come down so hard on like the little cutscenes with those deaths. I've heard a lot of reviewers and podcasters say like, oh, I'm getting really sick of watching that animation like over and over, but I know I've not beaten the game yet, but I'm not sick of that at all. So
I didn't get sick of them either. I actually like them because it kind of gives you time to breathe in the fights, because the fights are very intense. Like there are moments where you're just like constantly dodging and like, okay, got to parry this, got to make sure I don't get hit by that. Like you're juggling a lot, especially later on. And so getting those kind of Doom-esque kills is a kind of nice little bonus.
What about the move when you're holding your shield and he punches the shield from behind and it stuns like a wave in front of you? Do you know?
I used that one quite a bit because I think Dan used it in the quick look and I was like, okay, that looks great. I'm going to go down that path and use that, and it's
so
super
cool.
useful for stunning enemies and taking them out that way. So yeah, and like, you know, this game there's a lot of combat in it, but I think the other stuff is what shines for me, is the world creation, obviously, that we talked about, but also the little puzzles and environmental things that you get to do.
There's a lot of that. It's a really good balance between the sort of storytelling, environmental stuff, and the combat. It's not just combat. It doesn't overdo the combat too much, I would say.
Yeah, maybe in the late game, that's where I got a little frustrated with it in some areas. It wasn't overly hard. It was just a little tedious sometimes going through some sections. But I definitely felt that, like, doing those runic chests in particular, I loved. Like, every time I saw one of those, I'm like, okay, I'm not moving on until I figured this out. I'm gonna get this.
Really hard. I had to look up a couple.
Yeah, I didn't look up any of them, actually. I don't know what that says. Maybe I just have experience of doing more, because it's very Tomb Raider-esque in terms of like the new style of Tomb Raider games, where in those games you have tombs with environmental style puzzles, and so maybe I'm trained a bit more on that stuff.
I'll sort of give myself a time limit with environmental puzzles. I'll say, right, I'm going to have a go at this for like 5 to 10 minutes.
You do tend to, as we've talked about, get a little bit stuck on puzzles sometimes and be like, no, I'm done.
Yeah, if I've done my 10 minutes, it's like this has gone from interesting and cool to I'm annoyed and want to move on. Yeah, so then I'll just look it up and whatever. But
yeah. But those are varied enough and interesting. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic game on a ton of fronts. I highly recommend people go check it out. And the one thing I will say is, like, I'm super excited to see where this goes, because like it leaves it at a great place to where it's like, okay, shit's going to happen like in the next game, and there's probably going to be a trilogy for this as well. And I really would like to be on board like straight away for that stuff.
We're on board with the trilogy already.
I'm very into it. So there you go.
Yeah. I'll try and beat it for next time. I'm about 12 hours in or so, but yeah, I've had a busy week and I will get on that. I've also beaten another game, MBZ.
Yeah.
This game, Owlboy. It came out originally on Steam after something like 9 years of development.
It was a long dev cycle. Yeah, I remember them coming on Kind of Funny a while ago during GDC and seeing it and thinking it looked really cool back then, but not knowing how long they'd worked on it.
So that was it came out on Steam in 2016.
Right.
It's like a super small team. It's only a handful of people.
D-Pad Studios, I believe, is the name.
Pardon?
D-Pad
Studios, yes. And then it came to Switch in February, and actually came to Switch before PS4, Xbox, and it's only just come to those two this month in April.
Right, recently, sure.
Right. This game is all about that art style. For me, it's more than just 16-bit sprite-based art.
I think they call it high-bit.
High-bit, that makes sense because
there's crazy shit they do with
the animations and the sprite design is insane. Like it looks incredible. It really that combined with the fact that this is a fully orchestrated soundtrack really hits you out the gate. Like you're really kind of like, wow, this is incredible for what's ultimately it's hard to describe as a Metroidvania, because there's two things that for me don't make it a Metroidvania. One is
because that's one of those things is I've been waiting to play this game because I heard that's the type of game it was. and like it's interesting because it feels weird in its mechanics. Like there's this one part that I've seen of you as the owl boy, who's the main character, who like flies around places, carrying another guy who is the guy who actually shoots. So you're like kind of shooting while holding this other guy.
So you spend a lot of the game carrying guys shooting. There's
Okay.
like multiple different people you pick up at different times.
Yeah, and I don't know how I feel about that as a concept.
So I was the same. I was like, I don't want to be constantly fetching this guy and moving in here and doing that, and
right, as
but
opposed to like having powers of your own that you can use to fend
right,
off
but
enemies or whatever.
actually they are part of you, because very, very, very early on, like in the first 20 minutes of the game, so I'm going to spoil it, but it's 20 minutes in, it's
Yeah,
not
sure,
a big
whatever.
deal. You get a teleport thing, and you just press the X button, and they immediately are in your hand. So you can go from having no person to shooting in the equivalent time of it being part of Owlboy, essentially.
That's interesting because I would have thought that they would be used for puzzle solving more often, and it feels like if you can teleport them to your hand, you could break puzzles. Like if you're leaving them on a switch or something, for example.
Yeah,
like,
that happens as well, for sure. But yeah, it's difficult. It's both. I mean, mainly their combat, I would argue, just because they're different types of guns, basically. And it's very, the reason I was arguing it's not a Metroidvania is that there's no jumping, which immediately feels weird, because it's basically a dual analog, like one analog stick is elbow and the other analog stick is the direction you're shooting, which feels very unusual. And there's no jumping, like I said, but also it's incredibly linear. Like this game is more linear than Metroid Fusion. There's so few chances to explore different areas.
Because again, like from what I've seen, it seemed like the areas were relatively large spaces. Like because you can fly around and like go up. And
there's a couple of hub like areas that you can explore a bit, but then they go off into very linear, essentially dungeons. Like it feels a lot like between Shantae and Zelda. Like it's that style of like going down things, and it's an incredibly story-driven game. Like Owlboy's character is actually a mute. And they actually say that. So it's rather than just having this awkward, oh, Link never speaks. Why does he never speak? They just flat out say Owlboy. Oh yeah, he's a mute. Yeah, that's him. Like that's part of the story.
Sure.
And that's really interesting early on, where he's getting lots of criticisms and things from like the owl community, and the world that they create in the story is actually really enjoyable. I thought it was very good and well done, and the pacing, and there's twists and turns, and there's just a lot to this game that I just really wasn't expecting.
Because I more expected it to be just like, hey, it's another cool Metroidvania with some different mechanics.
Yeah, you know? I mean, the mechanics are maybe a slightly weaker part of the game. I think the production and the story is maybe better than some of the. There's some really cool bosses. There's some other frustrating bosses, and also there's some elements that sort of some stealth sections that I don't think played out particularly well. But
hey man, if you have bad stealth, like that's one of my big turn-offs for games is like bad stealth sections.
Yeah, I mean it's a very fast-paced game. Like it only took me maybe 10 hours to beat or so, and so you're constantly moving on from one idea to the next. So if there's something you're really not enjoying, it does change. It doesn't repeat an idea too often. So
that's good to hear.
There's a lot to it, but honestly, the game did crash on me actually maybe 3-4 times, which is quite a lot for a Switch game that's only 10 hours long. But I mean, the save system is perfect. There's no lives, there's none of that, and it literally auto saves the second you come into a new room. Like it's very generous on that front, which I'm very appreciative of, because some of the bosses really, really are quite tough. But more people really need to play this game. It doesn't feel like it's talked about enough, partly because of that release schedule, which is very unusual, having like that gap. But
and I wonder, maybe because it is weaker mechanically and more story focused, that less people were interested in it. Because from this style of game, I don't know, for me, before Celeste, I didn't really want that out of this style of game. The thing that Celeste is great about is like it's fantastic on both fronts. Whereas if Owlboy is a little weaker mechanically than it is story-wise, then because I did hear like a lot of people being like a little frustrated with the way you had to carry a guy around and stuff like that. But I don't know. I'll check it out. I'm definitely going to play it at some point.
It's worth checking out. It was on sale. It'll be on sale again. It's a really charming experience. I try not to use the C word too much, but it's very much that ilk.
Great
to say. But yeah, MBZ, what else have you been playing other than God of War?
Oh man, I only just played the motherfucking best game ever made, son. Super Mario World, dunking on people.
The best 2D platformer ever.
Yeah, of course. Nothing beats it.
According to the internet.
So, we had a history here of shit talking the 2D Mario games. It's a thing we do. You're not like a huge fan of Super Mario World, right? Like you don't.
I'm
really
not, but I mean,
it
is a good game. It's just it doesn't deserve the crazy praise it gets personally. But
sure,
it's a good game. I'm not going to say it's not a good game. There's a lot of 2D platformers I enjoy a hell of a lot more. Let's just say.
So I think because I've come off of Mario Maker, I'm more predisposed to like Super Mario World. And I think the reason for that is a lot of the power-ups and systems in the game are far more palatable to me. I really like the idea of holding a mushroom shell, or not a mushroom shell, a Koopa shell, and throwing it up in the air to hit a block. Like that's a really satisfying little mechanic, and a little touch on the idea of like Mario hits Koopa shells and they skid along the ground, like of picking it up and throwing it and that kind of thing. The cape is an awesome item that I really like and is fun to use and is difficult to like get control of like, okay, the bouncing up and down, but I really like that. So having those mechanics from the Mario Maker toolset and then going into this game and knowing that those are going to be used was a thing where I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm much more into this generally than I was Mario 3. And I think that's for a few reasons as well. It's because it just looks so much better. Playing this on the SNES Classic looks awesome. I love how vibrant and colorful it is. And one of the other things that's interesting is it kind of is weird in terms of the worlds you go to. They're not super traditional. Like Choco Land is not a thing that you usually think of like you go lava place or water place or whatever. Choco Land is one of those places where I'm like, oh, this is neat. The idea that it's kind of more brownish, but like built out of chocolate. And
there are Mario Kart tracks, multiple like.
Yes, I think Super Mario Kart has a.
And also the Choco. N64 Mario Kart has Choco Mountain, which I think was rebooted on the DS actually.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, like that's my only previous experience with this area, and I will say that like sometimes I go through a Super Mario World level and I'm like, I don't know that was very well designed. It feels kind of random.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
And that's the weird kind of. There's a sense with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which is the pinnacle when it comes to this type of thing, of context within a platformer, where every part of that level has been crafted to make sense within the cohesion of the world, right? Whereas a lot of these early Mario games just don't fucking have that. They're just random platforms, and they don't have a consistency to them, and they don't work very well in the world and doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems more haphazard, and like, why are there three things walking on top of this platform? Like, it doesn't to me feel like there was a lot of design thought put into them. Obviously, like there has been, because people made this game and specifically built it a certain way, but there are some levels, especially because the secret exits exist, where you can kind of find this weird route and you go out and you're like, oh, the level's over, I didn't really see anything there. And there is this one in Choco Place, whatever it's called, where it's this kind of underground maze one, and I like find my way through it in about 2 minutes, and I'm like, well, I didn't really find any enemies or anything, I just found the way to the end and it was done. So in a sense it kind of felt like a Sonic level almost, because like, you can do multiple paths and things like that. But there are a lot of weird things about Super Mario World that I didn't know. Like, there are mini thwomps. Like, there's these tiny little thwomps that don't go up and down, but they bounce like back and forth, kind of like in an arc, and you have to like go under them. There are enemies that stomp on the ground above you, and pillars of fire will come up, like 5 big pillars of fire. There's pipes that are sentient and just move up and down. Like, some green pipes are just moving up and down of their own accord. And there's just a lot of weirdness in this game that I wasn't expecting, because I guess my closest analog so far is Mario Maker, and a lot of those unique elements weren't brought into Mario Maker. Like, you don't have the sliding stuff in Mario Maker or any of that, but there are a lot of unique things in Super Mario World that are in that game and that game alone, which I enjoyed, because it was more surprising that way, and like coming into it and not knowing what was next, and not realizing that they had, you know, these boss fights that were sometimes a triceratops on a rotating platform that you have to bonk from below.
That is weird. That's something when I played the game, I'd never seen that in any review or screenshots or anything from before, and I was like, there's a triceratops just rotating.
Yeah, there are
around.
4 triceratops on this
like
water wheel thing, and
of the lava or something. Yeah, it's weird. Like,
so yeah, it does have that stuff that is surprising.
Did you find yourself using save states in a way that meant you didn't go back 4 levels when you died or game overed?
Yeah, I mean, I was just using it just for my own sanity. But honestly, the first, 5 worlds of the game are pretty easy. I didn't think I had much trouble until I got to maybe world 6 or 7.
It ramps up really fast, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like near
it
the
definitely.
end.
Right, it definitely does. And that's kind of the way those games were built. And we've talked about this to nauseum, so I'm not going to go through it again. But like, I do think that the whole idea of these levels being kind of cozy and self-contained and short, but also the worlds being very short. The worlds felt far kind of denser, and there were only a few levels you needed to go through to get to the next place, but also, obviously, you have the secret exit, so you can find a different thing off to the side, a switch palace, which will allow you access to another thing. And I really like that. I think that the levels are actually short enough, at least kind of at the start of the game, to where I was encouraged to go back to them, especially when I got to the Forest of Illusion, where you kind of go around in a circle. You kind of are forced to figure your way out of that one. But I played a couple of those levels multiple times, and I had fun exploring and finding the extra place. It was for me more satisfying mechanically than other Mario games, as I've mentioned. Like, I like throwing Koopa shells and using the cape and that kind of thing, so just moving Mario around feels better in this game overall, so I was more encouraged to...
So you got the hang of the cape. I mean, you must have got the hang from Mario Maker, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think that is the caveat here, is like, I've had that experience already, and I do think Mario Maker just basically improves the physics generally, because it's all basically
slicker.
modeled.
Yeah.
It's basically modeled after the new Super Mario Brothers game, which feel better to me generally.
Yeah. Blasphemy.
There's a lot of bullshit in Mario 3 where I'm trying to jump off something and I hit the jump button and it doesn't register because I'm too close to the edge or something. That drove me insane. Drove me the fucking insane, the end of Mario 3. But
you prefer this game a lot to Mario 3?
Oh, whoa, so much more. Like, Mario 3 fucking sucks ass compared to this game. This game is really so much better. It's just so much more inviting. It looks better. It feels better. It sounds better. Everything about it is so much more interesting to me, and it feels more creative as well. Like, the boss fights in terms of the Koopas, you do not have to do the same, like, jump on their head 3 times in a singular room kind of thing. It's more like, okay, now they're going to be bopping off of, like, Wendy's popping out a pipe, and there's 2 fake Wendy's, and figure out the real one.
Yeah.
And even, like, the final boss fight against Bowser is more interesting, where you have to hit him with throws up and bonk him on the head out of his clown car, and it does stuff like that. And there's other fun stuff as well, like at the end of every castle, Mario will do a fun little animation to defeat the castle. One of them, he pulls out this is a real thing that happens that I was like, what the fuck? He pulls out a broom and just wipes away the castle Mario Paint style, and it just disappears. And then in another one, he just goes like full Sabin and like picks up the castle and just throws it. And it's like, I really like that touch. Wow. There's a lot of nice little things in there, little things they didn't need to do that make it a much more fun little game to exist in. And I enjoyed it enough to go through and do the special stages in the Star World. Star World is weird because to get there is a little bit of a convoluted process, but once you're there, I actually found myself discovering the secret exits without looking anything up. Like, I basically bounced from one Star World to the next, because otherwise you have to go back to the main map and find the, like, how you get to Star World 2 from there, or how you get to Star World 3 from the main map. But if you find the secret exit within a Star World, it will take you to the next Star World wherever you are, like then and there. So I found the secret exit in, like, each of the stages first time without finishing them properly, and I was like, this is weird. Like, a lot of them were way easier than I thought as well. But the real challenge comes in the special stages, and my god, they are difficult. I played it similar to Super Meat Boy in the sense of I was save stating before them, and then I was just going run through them. And they were really good fun. I couldn't imagine doing that when I was younger, because I would have probably had to just grind for lives and then sit there doing it. And obviously, if I didn't save in time, I'd have to go back and do another stage again, which, But for the actual design of those levels, I actually thought that design was the strongest in the game, because it was really focused on the challenge, and there was this set thing before you, and they'd really thought about it. And I thought that, yeah, generally it was much better than some of the early stages that I'd done, where, just random giant bullet bill will float past and for no reason. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Also, Yoshi's great. I like Yoshi a lot. He's good. And then there's the weird, little Yoshis that you can feed stuff to, and they'll turn into a big Yoshi, like the Yoshi babies that you carry around. There's a lot of weird shit in this game that I didn't realize. But I think that overall it's
best game of all
people
time.
like this game. Yeah, it's a great game. I certainly think I like it more than you do. It's very good. Super Mario World, I like it a lot. It's very good.
I don't think it's hard to like it more than me.
Yeah, I know, obviously.
But I appreciate that. So interesting take.
So there you go. We don't hate Mario after all, people. Stop sending your hate mail.
Don't.
Not that you weren't anyway.
He's great.
Yeah, it's good. All right, well, that's going to close us up for what we've been playing. So join us after the break where I'm going to answer some of your emails. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second segment of today's show. It is the second segment, which means it's time for your emails. It's one topic we're covering this week. We brought in a couple of our messages from Discord, but before I get into that, I should read out the email address, which of course is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Please send in more. And like I said, jump in our Discord server. You can find a link to that from our Twitter account. So jump in there and get chatting. Send us messages, send us emails, send us anything you want. So we had a couple of Discord messages. Our first is from a Cerberus who's from Durham in the UK. What do you guys think about the easily drawn comparison of Yamauchi appointing Iwata and Kimishima appointing Furukawa? What impact, if any, will Furukawa's apparently fluent English have on Western Nintendo fans such as ourselves? Can anyone truly replace Shibata?
Okay, so I think we should probably set up the context here if people haven't heard. But very recently, after Nintendo's recent financial call or investor briefing, or who knows what the name for any of these things are, because none of us do business or finance or anything.
Businessmen doing business.
Businessmen doing a lot of business. They made a lot of announcements in terms of change of leadership and people moving around. So people like Koizumi and Tezuka have now been appointed to the board, and we have a new president, which means that Kimishima is basically finishing his tenure, his kind of guiding hand for 3 years, I guess, since Iwata passed away. And I thought, originally he was only going to be there for like a year or two, they said at the start, but it seems like they wanted a bit more of a kind of transitional phase, especially with Switch coming out.
Get past that Switch launch.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems like now they're perfectly positioned after first year of Switch. Everything seems to be going great. Now it's time to hand it over. And so it's being handed over to a gentleman by the name of Shuntaro Furukawa, who, interestingly enough, is around the same age as Iwata was when he was appointed president. And I like the Cerberus's comparison here, because it is like, okay, so we're going from one guy who is very much business focused to a guy who is very games focused and quite old. Yeah. Kimishima, not super old, but like 20 years older than Furukawa, like in his late 60s. Yeah, Furukawa 46, Iwata Yeah, and Iwata was around 42, 43, so Iwata was
Right.
actually younger than Furukawa when he was appointed. But it does seem like, okay, now we've gone through this era of Kimishima just basically carrying out what I think would be like Iwata's vision to some degree, and obviously guiding the ship himself, but we're now back to someone who is more similar to Iwata. And Furukawa is not someone who has a rich development background. He's much more a part of kind of marketing, and he's someone who did grow up playing games. And he mentioned like that. So there's been some interviews going around talking about how he grew up playing the Famicom, and he would have been maybe around 20-ish when Iwata became president of Nintendo. So yeah, he's definitely a much more like the youngest kind of president in terms of the modern era, even though he's like a bit older. But how do you feel about what we've learned so far about Furukawa? And do you think the comparison between Yamauchi and Iwata and Kimishima to Furukawa is kind of apt, as it were?
Yeah, to a degree. I think that that knowledge and ability to talk freely about video game development, and while I say he's not a development background, I'm sure he's very free to talk about like gaming in general, and that's not really something we had with Kimishima, and
No.
that's fine, but it was very different, that period that's still so memorable to us of under Iwata, when there were all these interviews coming out. And what was that interview series he did?
Iwata Asks was the
So
interview,
like,
yeah.
hopefully something like that can come about again, where you just have a younger guy who knows a lot about video games, has a huge experience of video games, and can talk about them freely in a way that can relate to fans. Like, hopefully that's exciting. And the whole idea that he speaks English could change that to a whole new level.
So something that came up in the Bloomberg interview is that he worked for 10 years in Germany, and so he is absolutely an English speaker, fluent in English. I wonder if he speaks some German as well, but like that would probably make sense because that's where Nintendo's headquarters are, in Europe. And that changes things, right? Because I think one of the best things about Iwata was he could go to GDC and deliver a speech in English and not struggle with that, and be able to communicate with people when events like E3 came around. And obviously Kimishima like didn't have much time to do that stuff anyway. Like 3 years was not very long when you consider Nintendo's presidents. There have been 4 since they started doing video games, and before that there were only maybe 2 others, I think, because it was through the Yamauchi family, right? So yeah, the Yamauchis basically were all presidents up until the point of Iwata. Iwata was the first non-family member to take over the company. And obviously, like before that, they did their card game stuff and they had all their toys and all those inventions, but it went basically down the Yamauchi generation. And so now we find ourselves in that position again. But yeah, it's weird because we haven't had that much history of presidents of this company while they have been deep into games, despite them having 30 years in the business of games itself. So it's very interesting, and I think the one thing that I'm curious about is how it will affect their presentations going forward, and whether Furukawa will be pushed more to the forefront, because right now it seems like in this new generation of Nintendo executives we have people like Koizumi, who is very much the, I guess, Iwata replacement in terms of a presenter figure. He is always in front of the directs. He's the one who is he's very charismatic. He's a guy who people like recognize at this point, and he's someone who is definitely kind of the face of the company now that people like Miyamoto have moved more to the background and more kind of managerial roles. So I wonder if they want to shift that balance at all, because with Koizumi they have someone who I think is great at that job, and I don't know if they want to shift it up again.
And Furukawa is actually coming in after E3, right? It's like in July, I believe. So
maybe it's during E3. I thought they said June maybe was the time.
Like, I mean, if it is June, that means there's a chance he could be like a big part of E3. We don't know, I guess. Like,
yeah. I think maybe I doubt it for this year, because it's such a quick transition happening.
End of April, it's quite like,
they'll
be in full swing of prep and all that, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. So I do think that like the figureheads are going to continue to be people like Tezuka and Koizumi, and obviously they'll trot out Miyamoto constantly for events like this, on Treehouse Live, and he's going to be coming out. And, yeah, Miyamoto is like the grandpa that you always wish you had. Like he's just the best.
Will Furukawa come and join everyone on the Giant Bomb couch? That's
this is the real question. Is like, now we have another English speaking Nintendo president. How much more access does that give the press, right, to these figures who in the past you had to go through translators and I think even to some extent Iwata did some interviews through translation. I don't believe Iwata was a super fluent English speaker. But that does open up that avenue, doesn't it, of places like Forbes and New York Times and these kind of bigger mainstream outlets to get that coverage. It's more accessible to them now, having someone who not only speaks English but also has experience living in Western culture. Like 10 years in Germany means that he will have a good idea of what fans, especially in Nintendo of Europe, appreciate and what our tastes are and how we feel about Nintendo and that kind of stuff. So I think he seems a great fit for the job because he has an international background, he speaks English, and he also is Japanese. So he's coming from kind of all the angles. Like he has the experience in all these different areas, and he's a marketing guy. Apparently, he joined the marketing team and became like kind of the head of their operations when it comes to that stuff in 2016, which means that most of the Switch's marketing is down to him and his team.
Right.
Especially in Japan, I guess. I don't know like how that works out through the US brand and whether they have any influence over how the Switch is marketed over here. But at least over there, he has been heading that stuff up. So yes, he plays games. Yes, he has marketing experience. Like all these check marks are being ticked off. So it looks on paper right now like he's going to do pretty well. And I'm interested to see kind of where he takes the company and what he will do with Nintendo and whether he will like stick by that philosophy. And I think that's the thing that sets Nintendo apart, is they have a certain philosophy around constantly innovating and pushing boundaries and trying something different. And I think that hopefully we'll see if he pulls some more of that stuff out.
Before we move on to our next question around the same theme, shall we address Service's last point? Can anyone truly replace Shibata?
Bally Shibata, he's my favorite. So here's the thing, is I feel like a lot of our listeners will not know the wonder and majesty that is Satoru Shibata.
It's so great.
Because so here's the thing, when Nintendo Directs happen, or at least when they used to happen in the Iwata era, they were much more distinct in terms of region, right? So because we live in Europe, because the UK is part of Europe, we got a different broadcast from what North America would get. And so when we watched it, it would usually be hosted in some capacity by the guy who headed up Nintendo Europe, Satoru Shibata, who also, during this kind of financial meeting, announced that, he is stepping down. He's not going to be in charge of Europe anymore. In fact, I think he's being promoted to be a higher position over in Japan. So basically going back to Japan and moving up the ladder, which is great for him. But I love Shibata because he's one of these characters in Nintendo's stable who only a portion of their audience will know quite well, because only people who watch the European Directs know what he does and who he is. And he's a goofy guy. He speaks pretty good English, and he also did a lot of stuff similar to what Iwata did. He was kind of maybe trying to be a bit of a prodigy in that way, in terms of he would dress up as Phoenix Wright and Professor Layton when they were promoting those games, right. And he would do a lot of goofy skits and stuff. It was in the era of Directs where that stuff was pretty common.
Like the Rhythm Heaven stuff, there was loads of crazy things.
Yeah, so Shibata, he will be missed from those presentations. Not that, we'd seen him recently anyway, because the new style of Direct is much more focused on the headlines, and we have Koizumi who's presenting those all now worldwide. So it seems like they've streamlined that stuff a bit more, and it's a shame, because I miss that old style of Direct that had ad-libbed, not ad-libbed because they clearly were all scripted, but moments that felt a bit more lighthearted and goofy and that kind of stuff.
Let's do something goofy to go a little viral sort of things.
Yeah, even though none of them went viral because it was during the Wii U era when nothing
Right.
for Nintendo would go
Nintendo's
viral if they
international
wished it.
footprint wasn't the biggest at the time. But
Yeah, absolutely. So, can anyone truly replace Simmer Service? No, no one can. He is the one and only. But hopefully, we'll get someone new who's cool and runs Nintendo of Europe well. So, there you go.
So our next message, another one from Discord, is from Capsule J, who's from Georgia, USA. Gents, Furukawa, the new Nintendo president, said his favorite game is Golf Story. Usually when a Nintendo exec is asked about their gaming preferences, they use it as an opportunity to either laud their history or promote a new product. But Furukawa instead chose to highlight an indie game from Australia. Do you think that this was just an offhand comment made by a new leader who is yet to be groomed for the media, or was it perhaps a reflection of Nintendo's growing relationship with the indie development scene? Also, Furukawa is a noted gamer. Kimishima was not. Do you think that having the background of being a gamer is beneficial to leading a company like Nintendo, or is there more value in having the outsider's perspective when steering a ship this large?
All right. So yeah, this was an interesting another thing that came up. I don't think he said it was his favorite game, but I think like at the moment,
favorite game.
Yeah, recent. What are you playing right now? What do you like?
Yeah.
And absolutely, because it seems when this question is often asked to developers, and I think there was a video that went around which was Koizumi and someone else answering questions for one another. Maybe it was Takahashi, and they do this like whiteboard challenge of like, what's your favorite Nintendo Switch game? And Koizumi was like Mario Odyssey, because clearly he's going to promote the game that's coming out soon, because like you've got to get that marketing on the go. And for someone who comes from a marketing background to be like, oh no, this little indie game that came out like 6 months ago is what I'm interested in, is very telling to me. Like, it's telling in a sense that he has a wide taste, that he is willing to go out of his way to play something a bit more niche, and that he is definitely someone who understands the importance of the independent development scene and how that is.
So do you think it's genuine, or is it something that it might have been genuine, but he brought forward more perhaps to show how into the indie scene Nintendo was, or
So you're asking if you think it was a deliberately chosen answer?
Yes, as genuine as it might be, was it deliberately made a big deal of?
Maybe he deliberately answered that to send a message of some sort, to say,
right,
like, these are our priorities as a company right now.
Yeah,
it's like,
it's very hypothetical. It's almost impossible to say
Sure.
one way or the other. But
like, I think honestly, it was probably just an honest answer for him.
Yeah.
Because he's probably like carrying his Switch around and doing, playing a game, and it's Golf Story right now, and that's really cool because it does show you that he isn't someone who's going to be like Reggie and boast about like playing Smash Brothers, but then get his ass kicked because he doesn't actually play video games, like because that happened and that was really bad.
That was so great.
So in that sense, it's good to know that he has that connection. And again, like with his history of like being in Germany for that long, I'm sure that he would have dealt with some of the WiiWare stuff going on back then, because there were it was far more Western developers, I think, going onto the WiiWare platform from Europe and America than it was from Japan. And even nowadays, the Japanese indie scene is nowhere near as large as it is over here. So I'm sure he got more exposed to things like, I don't know, Fluidity or, Lost Winds or things like that were happening during that era. And so now he probably has a taste for that stuff and has decided, I played this. And that's a thing that I wonder in the future of how much more that's going to be supported in Japan and how much more they'll do to keep indies as a core identifier of the Switch platform. Because you wonder now, with more third parties starting to get on board with Switch, like there's rumors of Fortnite coming, all this stuff. Do you think that they are going to, even if, bigger third parties come on board, stay true to that identity of fostering indies?
I think it's important that they do. And I think they will try to. I think that what we talked about, like 1 year into the Switch, one of the biggest pillars and most important parts of the Switch and its success and why we're enjoying it and etc. is the indie scene. And I've just bought a PS4. I like have very little intention of buying the majority of my indie games on the PS4, even if they're cheaper,
Right.
because I want that ability to play on the go. And I think that is something that is key to getting games on the Switch. And for Furukawa to say a game like Golf Story in particular, I was like, knowing basically nothing about this guy, I was like, right, what's this news?
He's good. He's good in your books already.
It ticks my boxes. Just he likes Golf Story. Great. That is one of my favorite games, especially from last year. I think it was a fantastic little nugget, regardless of whether how genuine or not it was. I think it was just a fantastic thing for him to say, and like him being a gamer or not, I think that's. Like you said, like Reggie, who, yes, he speaks English. Can he say much of anything about Nintendo that's not just PR stuff? Not really. And is he a gamer? Quite clearly not.
No.
And I think someone who might be able to have the combination of giving interesting interviews in English, and actually being a gamer and being able to play Smash Brothers could be a very powerful combo. And depending on how much Furukawa is sort of pushed forward into the limelight or takes more of a back seat, and we'll see how that unfolds. But I think it's quite exciting, and I mean, Nintendo right now is in a place that there's a lot of excitement and prospects, and the Switch could go any number of directions from the already successful platform they've created, and we'll see. I think it's interesting.
So do you think that it is more valuable to have someone like him or to have someone like Kimishima or Yamauchi? Because Yamauchi famously didn't play games at all. People would go to his office and like show him a thing, and he would make like a decision based on what it looked like or whatever. And Nintendo did fantastically during that era. Like that was when they became the market leader, like during the NES and everything. And Yamauchi was making those decisions despite the fact that he didn't play games and he didn't really have an interest in playing games. And Kimishima clearly has done well, like leading a vision for a console that is incredibly successful. So there is that balance, because clearly they're both very good businessmen. But Iwata was also a good businessman, but he had a vision. He had kind of a gamer's mentality and mindset.
Right, and how much of Nintendo's success or failure is down to a CEO ultimately? Like, it's impossible to say.
Right, yeah. How much power do they really wield? Like, where do the decisions get made? Who is it?
Exactly.
Like, how much does the board have an influence? And clearly they have so many, like, intelligent people over there, but it's hard to say, like, what direction is purely driven. Because to me, Iwata was definitely the instigator behind initiatives like Wii and DS, like trying to grow that audience, doing the Blue Ocean strategy and widening the pool was clearly something that came from a place of vision from someone like him. And I think that Furukawa may have a similar, bent to him. And obviously we don't know yet because we have no idea what he's going to do. We have no idea what business decisions he is going to make. But I do hope that, like, they have chosen this guy for a reason. Like, clearly he is supposed to be the president for a long time to come, because he is young. They've taken 3 years to make this decision, to groom somebody, to find somebody who is going to fit the role. So clearly this isn't a Kimishima situation again. They don't have to, like, plug a hole. They have taken their time and they have focused on someone who they think is going to be someone who can steer the ship for a long time. So I do think that they will have taken all this into consideration. And the other thing I wanted to mention about Furukawa is that he has links to the Pokemon Company, that he did some stuff with them.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Which I wonder what that does for relations between Nintendo and the Pokemon Company, whether it makes them stronger, whether it allows them to communicate more easily and get things done now they have a guy who worked there and has connections there at the top of the company. That's another interesting thing that I wonder about, and we'll see where it goes, because Pokemon is maybe one of the most powerful brands in the world.
It really is,
and having them on your side a bit more is definitely good. As weird as the relationship between Nintendo and TPC and Game Freak and all this, I never want to have to explain that thing in my life, because I quite honestly don't understand who owns what or anything when it comes to Pokemon.
Yeah, it also has changed a number of times, I believe, as well, which makes it even more complicated. But I'm sure we'll see at E3 whether Furukawa will want to be more public or not, and it'll be interesting to see the direction. And
I don't know. I'm not sure that that's the kind of place in which we make our mark in the sand, because it's going to be so soon after he takes over that I think
the next businessman business meeting.
Right, or
business.
the next direct that rolls around, whether
Right.
they're going to mention it at all, whether he will pop up at all and maybe say something in English, like introduce himself to the audience perhaps.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That would work.
It could do, and I don't know what they are thinking when it comes to that. But
Who knows, you know.
but the real question, Bally, is how good will the memes be? Because now we've got a new face to put memes to. The best Kimishima stuff was Kimishima with the shining sunglasses. That was my favorite Kimishima meme. What will the Furukawa memes be? Will he join the hype train along with everyone else in the Nintendo pantheon? All I know is that man should be ready for his face to be plastered on a million different message boards, because it will happen.
Right.
And I'm excited for it.
We are getting into that E3 build-up as well.
We are, yes.
It's going to be great. But
every year, man, every year, the thread
year.
with the E3 memes is my favorite.
It's the best
so
time
good.
to be doing a Nintendo podcast, is that build-up to
Absolutely.
E3. Yeah. So anyway,
All right.
I think that's all we've got time for your emails. But as I said at the top of the segment, please send more in. Please send them to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. Also, jump in our Discord server and send us messages through there. They will be read out on the show and we'll read them all. It's a good thing to do. We'd really appreciate it. So that's all we've got time for our second segment. Join us in the next segment where the jukebox returns.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the third and final segment of this here show today, in which we return to a beloved segment that we haven't done in a little while. It's the Jukebox. It's where myself and Bally go back and forth with each other, testing each other's video game music knowledge, whilst also oftentimes giving us an excuse to talk about games from our childhood or games we've talked about on the show, and discuss a bit about their music, a bit about the games themselves, and have a fun time. And you can also play along at home, because it's a fun thing to do. Maybe let us know how you did in our Discord or on Twitter or via various means, and that would be a fun thing. Bally, this time around, it is me who is testing you.
How mean are you feeling today, MBZ?
I don't know. I was like, hey, let's throw in some gimmies, let's throw in some bastards. I wanted to get a bit of a gambit going on. You weren't too bad to me last time, so
Yeah,
I think this is
you
more
got
of
about
a
3 out of 5 last time, which is
sure.
Decent.
This is a segment more for fun and enjoyment, I think, than being mean these days. Although being mean can be fun, but even when you're mean, the intention is always about having a fun discussion about the games. So I guess without further ado, let us begin with the first song. There you have it, the first song of the day.
When it first started, I thought it was like Zelda, Gerudo Desert. It's like it's like the similar instruments, like that guitar. And then I was like, oh, I know this. It's Gunman Clive, but I don't know whether it's 1 or 2. I want to side with 1 because I think it might be dastardly to go for 2. Yeah, I think it's Gunman Clive 1.
And that's your final answer?
I think so, yes.
You are correct.
Right.
That is Cowboy in Town from the first Gunman Clive
It's like
game.
level 1, I think, right?
Yeah, it might be. I didn't know what to choose from this because I didn't want to be too mean because I didn't know how well you'd remember the soundtrack. But Gunman Clive is just a great... It's maybe the best value for money you can get on 3DS.
Very much so,
in terms of like, here's a solid action game that is super short, in and out in an hour, and has great variety in it. Looks incredible. I love the very chalky kind of aesthetic.
And it looks great in 3D as well. I know this
Yeah.
game is on Wii U, the collection, and it might come
Right.
to Switch, I don't know, but it'd be really... I think it looks best on 3DS.
Yeah,
In 3D, I should say.
You get a lot out of it in the 3D for sure. But you were very right to like choose Gerudo Valley because it does have that kind of deserty vibe
Yeah.
to it, doesn't it? And that's the whole theme of the game is you're a cowboy and you're kind of going across the West. So, some good sweeping
If you
tunes
if you
there.
have the 3DS and you've not played it, honestly, it's only like a few hours long. If
And it's
that.
like £2, literally
It's
£2.
£2. It's such an enjoyable modern take on that kind of... It's like a Mega Man running
Yeah.
down style. It's really... And it's a hell of a lot easier than Mega Man, but in a good way.
Is there any other kind of part of the soundtrack that you recall from this game at all? Because you seem to get that quite quickly.
I just remember it being very good. Other than that main theme that you've played just now, I really
Right.
can't put my name on a specific theme other
Yeah.
than knowing that stuff like the boss music and the music in Gunman Clive 2 as well is very good.
It's very Western, like thematically, isn't it? Like, and so it comes through in the instrumentation there, and in the kind of almost saloon style kind of sway to it has in that music.
Yeah.
So
I don't
so
know what Bertel Holberg, I think his name is,
Yes.
is up to at the moment.
I think he's working on something for Switch.
Great.
But
yeah, follow him on Twitter. He's great.
absolutely, and go play Gunman Clive. It's really great, very very good. Good music. I enjoyed that. All right, Bally, you ready to move on to the next song?
Yes.
Let's do it. Really feeling the 80s vibes in that song.
Jeez. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, this is hard. That is
Yeah.
some guitar, some rocking guitar right there.
Absolutely. It's not what you usually hear in a game soundtrack, is it? Like, that kind of feels like some cover that you'd hear in maybe I don't know, like, those free kind of databases of music.
Right.
For, like,
But I
kind of
mean,
80s
in
music
most
almost.
games we play, I agree it's not something you hear. But the second
Yes.
you move into driving games and
Sure.
like maybe open world games, I don't know. But I mean, I have got a few driving games I've played, and I'm leaning towards those. I got a lot on the N64 that I dipped in and out of. That you might even... That's a really deep dive if you've gone for that.
Sure.
The music sounds a bit newer than that, perhaps. So I'm
Right.
siding more with something like the GameCube, and
Okay.
I'm feeling like it might be Burnout 2 Point of Impact, which I played a lot of. But I seem to remember the sound. I don't remember this soundtrack from that game. It's just based on logic that I'm going for that game.
Sure.
But maybe I should...
For me, a lot of driving game soundtracks are often defined by the licensed music, right? Like, that's the thing that often
Right.
for me is like, yeah, like GTA is defined by its licensed music. That's not a driving game, but, open
I
world
mean,
games like
something
that.
like Point of Impact definitely didn't have licensed music in the same way.
Really? That's surprising to
Yeah,
me.
neither
Hmm.
did what was the other? I was about to say maybe Excite Truck. That sounds like.
I mean, the great thing about Excite Truck was you could use your own music. I could have been a real dick and put in like, I don't know, some random song and be no, that was me choosing that for my Excite Truck soundtrack. That would be cheating of the highest degree.
I'm gonna go Burnout 2 Point of Impact.
And that's your final answer.
It is.
That is incorrect. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is Mario Strikers Charged. It is.
Oh man, this is like the menu music, isn't it?
So it's Mario's theme. I don't know if that's the main menu music, but so I was going through the soundtrack for this game and like looking for different songs. I'm like, I was really surprised at how heavy everything was. Like the entire game. I think that's reflected in the look of it and the style of it generally. This is like a hard rock game, you know? Like all the character portraits are drawn in such a kind of jagged edgy style, like very edgy, very hard lines. And it's a very distinct look for like Peach and Mario and stuff, and the kind of shoulder guards and things they wear. They're very kind of hard rock almost in terms of their portrayal.
Yeah, and they got like crop tops, and then they've all got their shoulder pads, like you said. And yeah, it's a very good game. It doesn't feel anything like what a football game should or does feel like, and I like it for that.
I think in the past you've mentioned that it almost feels like its own sport. You know?
Yeah, it actually feels more similar to ice hockey than football,
right?
Or soccer.
Because you're like smashing into people, kind of like Red Card, where you can punch people. And
the way that you move the ball about feels a lot more like a puck. And I've played quite a lot of NHL in the past with friends at uni and stuff. That's actually a game I should maybe pick up on PS4 actually. But
sure, yeah.
It feels like that, and you're really charging. The way that you charge up shots and shoot it's not like football at all. It's a lot like ice hockey, to be honest, in the way that those video games play. I'd love a game like that to come to Switch. Like I think they can do more with that idea and go further. And of course, it's Next Level Games, which is they're great. So I think they
are. Unfortunately, a lot of people gave them hate for Federation Force, which was really not their fault.
Yeah. That's the most recent outing, I think.
But I wonder if they have something else in the works right now. I hope they have a thing for Switch.
Are they working on that Luigi's Mansion reboot? Maybe.
I don't know. They might be. I think they may be helping with that. I mean, they had the assets, and
another company's just using their engine.
But potentially, but you know, they could be a good shout to maybe just do another Luigi's Mansion on Switch if people are suspecting that. Like they've done a great job of just reviving old IP and like doing Punch Out again and doing Luigi's Mansion again. I think that we think of Retro and Next Level as the two Western studios, and mainly what Nintendo go to them for is like, hey, here's a dead IP, make it something new and different that we can release again. And so if I'm ever thinking about like, okay, what is a franchise Nintendo will bring back, I usually go to those two studios as like they're my port of call for what they could do, but we'll see. There's potential there. This was a Wii game, right? This was the sequel to...
This was a Wii game. There was a game on GameCube, but I've had my hands on very briefly in the past. Someone had it or something, and that game actually did feel a lot more like football. And then the formula did change up quite a bit for the Wii version, and I think it plays a lot better actually. And
it had online as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it had online. I played a few online matches, got my ass kicked a few times.
Summarily.
Yeah, and the one thing the Wii game does have, it's got this like keeper mode where
I remember the motion control, like if you do a super move and you have to stop, like because it shoots like 6 or 5 balls at once, and you're like, oh no, I have to use motion controls to block all these balls, and it's very finicky. And
like as good as motion controls are, it can sometimes be a bit jumpy, a bit glitchy.
Yes. I remember you just pulling off a fuck ton of super moves on me, and me like missing every shot, and you scoring like 6 goals at once, and me being like, fuck this game.
It's not a nice mechanic, and I think that game would be a lot better without it. And I'm sure if another game came out, they'd not keep in something as obscure as that. It was a thing of its era, I think.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of the music of this game, it's one of those where it's more in the background because you're so focused on the competition and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it doesn't seem too distinctive. Like the fact that it took you a long time to figure out like what even type of game this is.
It's tough.
It's but
that was a tough
one. Cool.
That was a tough one.
Definitely different. Like you wouldn't expect that soundtrack to be in a Mario game, and yet
no.
There you go. Mario Strikers Charged. All right. Well, let's move on then to the third game in our series right now. There you go. Maybe thought I'd throw you a bone here in the middle of this game. But very nice piano tune going on.
Wait,
How do you
that
feel,
was
Bally?
meant to be easy.
I don't know. What do you think? How are you feeling?
One game stands out to me that this is, and I'm really surprised we've not done it yet, and I'm feeling like it can't be anything else. And
Okay.
that's Xenoblade Chronicles.
And is that your final answer?
I'm just trying to think, because I really don't play many games that have soundtracks similar to Xenoblade Chronicles. So, I guess that is my final answer, yeah.
Okay, well, that's wrong.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
God.
I thought this would be like the easiest one possible. But maybe it's because I chose a lesser known track from the game.
It was very
this-
familiar.
This is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Bally.
Oh, right.
This is Mifa's theme from Breath of the Wild.
Right, yeah.
So there are a few songs in the game that I could have chosen, which would have smacked you across the face
Sure,
and been
sure.
like, "Hey, I'm Breath of the Wild." But I was like, "Okay, maybe let's choose a bit more of a niche one." But I wanted to choose this game because it gets derided a lot for its music, and there are so many parts of the game which I think are defined by its music. You know, like when you're getting to a stable and you hear the distant call of
yeah.
the da-na-na, and it like gets louder and louder as you approach, and it's such a subtle indication of like comfort, and you juxtapose that to the very frantic when a guardian approaches you, the like very frantic piano notes to the like very sparse notes when you glide across the field. It's kind of all over the place, but it is so cohesive when it's all put together.
No, I think it works really well. I thought it was Xenoblade Chronicles, and I thought but it sounds a lot more recent than that. But then I thought it can't be anything else, and I've not. I don't know. I started to think Xenoblade Chronicles X because that's it. It felt more recent, but
okay. No, Xenoblade Chronicles X would have had lyrics in it.
yeah, gone on
at the very least.
Yeah. But I think the Breath of the Wild soundtrack is fantastic. I think it suits that game. I think that at first maybe it was a bit strange, like there was no big thumping tune. I mean, it does have big thumping tunes, it's very rare.
I think the biggest thumping tune of it is when you enter Hyrule Castle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
It's great.
It's such an incredible piece of music of taking the theme of the Dark World and Ganon's Tower and just remixing this remixing it in this just incredible orchestral arrangement that is just so grandiose, and it's I think deliberate because the rest of the game is building to that one moment, right? Like your entire journey is you preparing and getting stronger and approaching the castle. And when you get there, it's like, okay, this is it. Like this is where shit hits the fan, and you really need to like get yourself in check because it's going to be a challenge. And absolutely, that song is probably the standout. The one that I always think about is after I got to the Rito village, and I'm like, I walk inside and it starts playing the theme from Wind Waker, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't wait until Bally gets to this part because he's gonna.
You kept messaging me like, have you gone to that part?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think we've extolled the virtues of Breath of the Wild quite a bit on this show, so I don't know huge amount more to say, but yeah. I think the recent thing is recently someone posted the full trailer score from it was the January 2017 presentation.
I'm sure that score is in the game near the end. Like there's some final cutscene that Caroline did and I was watching, and it has that music.
Or like some of it,
or at least some of it. Yeah, it's really, really strong. It's so epic. It's like it's very Lord of the Rings.
It grows and it grows, and then the moment where it like segues into the main Zelda theme is just it's transcendent. It's incredible. One of my favorite just pieces of video game music. Full stop.
Oh, it's
I adore
very
it.
special. That one, yeah.
So that was the thing I think that came out recently, and I was like,
that's the one you wanted to use.
That
but then
triggered.
You thought, I think Bally will get this one.
And also, here's the problem: is if I use that, I would have to use the whole like 2.5 minutes or whatever instead of 1 minute. So
Yeah.
I can't just cut that off. It's not
can't
right
cut
to
that
the song. It's not on. Maybe that's why I haven't chosen any Xenoblade songs yet. Is because it's like it's not right to cut Tragic Decision off halfway. It's just I can't do it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
pains me too much. So yeah, I went for that. And,
Has
that's
Xenoblade-
Mifa's theme. But,
Has Xenoblade been used before? Was I wrong to?
I don't know.
use
I
that
haven't.
as a-
Well, I was checking to what we had done and what we
Yeah.
hadn't, and I didn't check for Xenoblade. I didn't think about it in that way, but yeah, potentially in the future. We'll see. But yeah, the champions obviously have their own themes. This was the one that felt to me like the most kind of distinct of those, and I was like, okay, this works quite well. I like it. So there you go. It's Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. See if you can pick up some slack
1
here
out
with
of
the fourth
3.
game,
Here we
Bally.
go.
I don't if that was my gimme. I don't know how you're going to fare with the other two. But let's see. Let's move on to game number 4. I'm all about the heavy guitars today, Bally.
Oh my
it seems
God.
like the end of that really sounds like a Metallica solo to me. And I was just realizing
This-
that now. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that kind of has that feel to it.
As I said with song 2, which ended
Uh-huh.
up being Striker's Charge, like it's mainly like driving games, and
Yeah.
I don't associate that with Wave Race as well.
Uh-huh.
So I'm kind of torn between Wave Race and Burnout 2 again.
Okay, yeah.
So I went with Burnout 2 last time. Was wrong. It was Mario Strikers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm gonna go with Wave Race on the GameCube. Blue Storm, I think it's called. Yeah.
Wave Race Blue Storm, that's your final answer.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Wow.
Bally, yeah.
Very happy with
so this is Ocean City Harbor brackets sunny. So I guess different times of or different weather will change the music.
Yeah, sunny and rain and the weather conditions are a huge part of Wave Race in that game, where the waves can vary drastically based on the weather, and like
Okay.
of course you got sunny and dark and sometimes stormy, like when the waves are really really high, and that gives you like a wave estimate before you start the race. It'll say like it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 meters high, and sometimes you have waves that are 4 meters high, and it's an absolute joke sometimes trying to
Sure.
like maneuver. I think Wave Race Blue Storm is an incredible game, and I think it'd be great if another Wave Race game came out. It's a very unique take on a racing game, where that reliance on like the wave height and how you maneuver with and handle the choppiness basically it's exciting. Like I think it's a great format.
I was wondering if I could choose like any of these Wave Race songs and it might be somewhat ingrained into your childhood memories, because it seems like one of those games where you'd be replaying races again and again and again, and so you would have those tunes kind of almost indoctrinated into the back of your mind somewhere. So I was like, I don't know where to go with this.
Yeah, it was sitting in there, but in the same way, the way you play a racing game doesn't really change that much. So a lot of those Burnout 2 tunes are in my head as well.
Okay.
But I definitely spent more time with Burnout, so they're probably more in my head than the Wave Race
really?
song. Yeah, I
I
definitely
realize
played
that.
more
Huh.
Burnout 2. Burnout, that's another thing I should get into on PS.
Is this song generally representative of the soundtrack for Wave Race, would you say?
Yes, most of them are rocky. A lot of them aren't as well. Man, really wanting to play that game now. Like it's so
Yeah.
good. But it's a tough thing to get into because of the whole nature of weaving between boys, and like I think I played a bit with you when we were younger, MZ,
Yes.
and you would just like
I struggle so much when it comes
and,
to
like, yeah.
orientation, you know, and I think like that's why I'm bad at Star Fox. It's why I'm bad at Wave Race, is like going in between things in terms of like spatial depth, right? And that's
Right.
why I love the 3DS so much, is because a game like Pilot Wings Resort,
yeah.
I was actually decent at, because you have the depth perception to aid you in that case. And I don't know, it's something that you have a talent for that I just quite clearly don't. But you know, if a new Wave Race came out, I would 100% give it a go on Switch.
Love it. I mean, water physics and graphics have gone so, they're so much better than they were in 2003, I think, when this game came out originally.
Yeah.
And I think you could get a really great looking Wave Race game on Switch.
Did you see recently, I believe it was Shinya Takahashi who was doing an interview, and he made mention that like, oh, that series, Wave Race, yes, I like that series. Maybe we'll do something with that. Yeah, so they did actually make mention of Wave Race somewhat recently in an interview. Might have been Takahashi, might have been Koizumi. I can't quite remember.
I mean,
but
all these series are one surprising reboot away from from a game. It's just about which
Sure.
one they pick and when, and it's very difficult to try and analyze when that could happen. But you know, that could be a hint. I think it would be a neat game to come out later this year if they felt
I mean, Switch
was
seems like it's
worth it.
being a platform to rebirth things on, and it kind of feels like anything you launch on Switch will be a success. For God's sake, that Kirby game that was
past a
completely
million,
subpar is like the best-selling Kirby game in a while.
I think there's 10 games that have sold past 1 million on Switch now or something.
It's something along those lines, yeah.
I mean,
it's a pretty
maybe
high
Wave
number.
Race is Retro's game. Who knows?
Yeah, I feel like that'd be a waste of their talents, quite honestly. Like, not to denigrate Wave Race, but for me, I want Retro to do something a bit more grander in
Big and
scope.
bold, yeah.
I mean, like, they have some experience because they worked on Mario Kart 7, right? Like, they did a bunch of the tracks for Mario Kart 7
Yeah.
and aided with that work. So, in terms of a similar style of game, they would be equipped to do so. I just would prefer if they were doing something else, which maybe, we'll see. Who knows, Bally? Nintendo's E3 plans were announced, and they're like, okay, so we're only talking 2018 games. And it's like, well, does that mean the Retro's game is 2018 and it will be announced and released within a few months?
Exactly. And the second it's not 2018, they might just be like, yeah, we're not talking about it. And that's another year.
It's
How many
another
years
year.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, God, it's been a while. But one day, Bally will get there.
Oh, surely have they not said in the past, like, yeah, we're just talking about this set year, and then at the end they've done some trailer for something that's next year? Like, I'm sure that's happened before.
Maybe they did it within the direct last year, or whatever they call
Okay.
it, video presentation, where Shinya Takahashi was literally like, we're not going to be talking about anything really aside from things this year, so
Yeah,
don't
you're
worry.
right. Yeah,
and then it
exactly.
cuts, and the next thing they show is fucking Metroid Prime 4 logo.
Exactly.
So it's like, what? Okay,
So
you just told
I
us.
honestly wouldn't rule out. We're going to get to our predictions, I'm sure, shortly.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I wouldn't.
yeah, that's
I
coming
honestly
up,
wouldn't
that's coming
rule
up.
out what Retro's working on, or Metroid Prime 4 trailer, whatever, even if they are coming out later in a later year.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right. Well, there you go. There's another tick on your box. I expected you to get number 3 and not number 4, but hey, it's how this
Probably
game
should have
works
gotten
out
3.
sometimes.
I just had it just wasn't
Yeah.
happening. Wasn't happening.
All right. Well, let's move on then to the final game in our sequence, game number 5. You know what they say, Bali? Always leave the meanest one until last.
That is mean. We gotten into Me Plaza sort of music now. This is hard.
You're right. You're on the right lines. You're on the right lines. I'm not going to say more than that.
I'm on the right lines with Me Plaza.
This is definitely a bit of a harder one, I guess, for you to recall. But I don't know. It depends how much you played this game and how much it's in the back of your brain. As I said with Wave Race, like you potentially might have this kicking around somewhere. I don't know.
If you've gone for like the Me Street Plaza or one of the
no, I'm not cheating here. This is a video game.
This is a video game.
This is a game you can put in a system and play. Yes.
Sounds a lot like Animal Crossing, but I feel like I know Animal Crossing songs.
Yeah.
And this doesn't sound like one of them. Like I don't know it. That style just sounds Animal Crossing. So then I'm trying to think, what's like Animal Crossing but isn't Animal Crossing that's also not the Me Street Plaza?
It's not a very big intersection.
And then I'm like, one of the Wii series, so like Wii Fit, I never played Wii Music, so it's not going to be that. Okay, let's go for Wii Fit. I think it's wrong, but let's try it.
So your final answer is Wii Fit?
Yes.
That is incorrect.
Yeah.
This, Bally, is a classic that should have helped you and your education. It's Big Brain Academy for the Nintendo DS. So I actually put this in here because I actually wanted to know more about this game because I never owned it and I don't really know what the difference is between this and Brain Training because it was all in the era of the touch generations and all these weird kind of DS style games that were reaching out to different people.
Sorry, what was Brain? I thought this was Brain Training. I'm confused.
No, Big Brain Academy. You owned Brain Training and Big Brain Academy.
Sorry, this was the music you've just played me. It's from Big Brain Academy.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
got you. Because you owned Brain Training. We both owned that one, but I only owned Big Brain Academy.
Right. So, what the fuck is Big Brain Academy, and how's it different, and what does it do?
Looking back, it's a really bad game, and I don't really know why those games it was so big at the time. It's like
it was like well marketed. It was kind of exercise your. It was very much in the same vein as a Wii Fit in terms of that was the physical exercise. How about you do mental exercises, right? Do this every day and it will increase your acuity and your maths and all that stuff.
So it would be like, right, I spent this much money on this thing. What's my change? And then you have to pick coins out of like using the touchscreen on a picture, like to say what the change was. And there was one to do with weight as well,
right?
And it was like it's kind of genuinely it felt like practical uses of numbers and things that were kind of useful for everyday life and just getting your brain a bit quicker at things like that.
See, that sounds more Layton-esque to me in terms of the not abstractness, but more because Brain Training was far more, okay, here's straight maths. Here is 1 + 8, what is it quickly, you know? Whereas this sounds like more of one of those maths problems that I fucking hated at school, which is like, if Susie has 8 apples and Jeremiah has 12, how many does Bill have? You know, that kind of bollocks, which I fucking hate.
It was a little bit more like that, but it was still fun. Like it was still quite gamey. I'm just struggling to remember the games. I kind of want to go and look on YouTube now at some of those other games because
you should do.
I maybe spent a few hours with it max. Like it. Really,
okay, so I was wondering like how much you used it and how much it was helpful in any way.
I didn't use it very much. I definitely was more on the Brain Training bandwagon and played that daily for a while. And I think I tried to get my parents, like, I think you could do multiple accounts and then
I believe
and
so,
that was the part of the joy of it. It was like
competition.
My dad's called
almost.
Robert, and they'd be like, Robert's not been on in a while. Have you seen him about? So it's like, I've told him he should be doing this more, and it'll make his brain better and all this. So I kind of I think we both enjoyed Brain Training quite a bit more, and then this one was just kind of. I think I bought it just because I liked Brain Training, and this was another game, and it's similar. We
were very into the touch generation stuff.
Yeah,
like Nintendo
we really
and
were.
Brain Training. Yeah,
all the sort of mainstream DS games we definitely gave a go and enjoyed the majority of them quite a bit. Definitely.
So I don't know. The music in this game is definitely like hey, you're working on a brain teaser, and this is just going to repeat this thing again and again. And
Yeah.
the thing that I think maybe gives it away is the what's it called, the TikTok thing, which is, what's the name of that when it just like a repeater? I don't know what the fuck you call it. Where it just goes back and forth. Metronome, fucking metronome. That's it. Yeah. So the metronome there is kind of like trying to keep you focused, almost, I guess, with the rhythm of it. But there you go. Well, Bally, you got 2 correct.
2 out of 5. That was
pretty good.
That was tough. I was very chuffed with the Wave Race, but a bit gutted about Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. I was like, I should maybe put in like Tarrytown or something like that, but I felt like I had to give you at least a bit of a challenge when it comes to Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's a game
Definitely.
that we've absorbed so much of, that so much of it we know back to front.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd throw that one in there. But there you go. Those are the tunes. Let us know how many you got right and how you did. That'd be fun to know. And next time, Bally, you can throw it right back at me and give me some nasty picks like Big Brain Academy.
Now that we know where we stand on stuff like brain training, I think I've got a few dastardly ideas.
Okay, sure. I'll rise to the challenge, let's say. So with that said, that's pretty much going to close out the show today. We have a few things to talk about at the end. First of all, let's talk about our Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/thisnintendolife. And in fact, at the start of the show, we had a announcement to make regarding our Backlog Club, and we are going to have a poll open for the new Backlog Club, where $1 and above patrons can vote and choose between 3 games that we have chosen, and we're going to maybe like rotate through these, and if one of them doesn't win, we'll maybe put it back in a poll later and that kind of thing. But the 3 games we have chosen are Kirby Triple Deluxe on 3DS, which you can find pretty cheaply these days. It's maybe 15 quid maximum, because it's part of the Nintendo Selects line. Sin and Punishment for Nintendo 64, which you can download via the Wii U Virtual Console, and is like 6 quid or so on there. And Punch Out on Wii, which is again available on Wii U download through there. So you can find that, or you can find probably a Wii copy somewhere in a secondhand shop or something along those lines. But those are the 3 video games that we have chosen: Kirby Triple Deluxe, Sin and Punishment, and Punch Out for Wii. We'll put up that poll when this show goes up, and patrons can go and vote there and decide what the next Backlog Club game is going to be. And we're going to give you 2 weeks to do this. So until the next show, on the next show, we will announce what it is and then hopefully just get working on it. And we chose these games because they're all relatively short compared to something like Final Fantasy VI, which took...
Yeah, we banned RPGs for this round, but yeah.
Yes.
If you want one of them to win, it's $1 to vote, and yeah, we welcome it all.
Absolutely. So again, you can find that patreon.com/thisnintendolife. And we'd also like to thank our top patrons, Bally.
Of course, our 2 top patrons are my girlfriend Caroline and, of course, Atari Alex. So thank you both for your $10 tier support. It's much appreciated.
Absolutely. And yeah, you can find a bunch of stuff over on our Patreon. We have exclusive episodes that go up every month, and building up a bit of a backlog of those as well. So if you join up now, you can... have a look and go through those archives. We also can be found, of course, on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thisnintendolife. Episodes go up the Friday after they go up on iTunes. And we can also be aided in the British Podcast Awards, which we talked about last time. I believe the link is britishpodcastawards.com/vote is where you can go. And it doesn't matter if you live in America or Bulgaria or Norway or Lithuania or wherever in the world. You can go to that website and just type in This Nintendo Life, give your name, an email, and vote. And that's a vote for us. And that would be really cool if you could do that. Very much appreciated. Again, I'll try and link that in the description so you can check that out. And yeah, you can find us in various other places. We have a Discord, which is linked through our Twitter. You can follow our Twitter, which is at TNL Podcast. That is at TNL Podcast. And you can find me at Lord NBZ. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91.
Absolutely. And we can also be reached through our email address, which is, Bally?
thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com.
send in some more emails. Need some more emails for next time and for Everlasting. Coming up to E3's time, so if you have some E3 predictions, you could maybe send those along.
Yeah.
That'll probably be 2 shows from now is when we're going to do that, I think. That's when the timing
Yeah,
works
we'll
out.
work it out, but the show before E3, whenever that is, will
Yes.
be our predictions special.
Yeah, so if you want to send those in a little early, you can do that, and we might read some of those. But aside from that, I think we've covered most things here, Bally. I know you want revenge on me for this display.
I do want revenge. I was just going to run through those backlog options again for people who want to vote. They are Kirby
Sure.
Triple Deluxe on the 3DS, Sin and Punishment on the N64, and Punch Out on the Wii.
Yes, and you can get all of those in modern forms some way accessible.
Yes.
So, yes. All right. Well, I guess that's it, Bally. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Until next time, play some Big Brain Academy. Get your brain in shape. get your your noggin going. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time for another episode of This Nintendo Life. Goodbye, folks. The musical interludes used on today's show were Ashes from God of War, copyright Sony Santa Monica 2018, and the main title track from Owlboy, copyright D-Pad Studio 2016.